In the shadowy realm of organized crime, one group stands above the rest, reigning supreme over Canada's underworld, the Hells Angels. From their humble beginnings as mere subcontractors for the Mafia, they ascended to become equals in the criminal hierarchy, reshaping the landscape of Canadian crime. But how did this outlaw biker club rise to such staggering heights of influence and control? And who were the key figures behind their meteoric rise? Join us as we delve deep into the captivating saga of the Hells Angels' ascent to power in Canada. Walter Stadnik was born on August 3, 1952, in Hamilton, Canada. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, he was described as a well-mannered yet somewhat rebellious youngster. Despite showing glimpses of intelligence, school wasn't his cup of tea. He seemed indifferent, almost as if he didn't care about succeeding academically. As he entered his teenage years, Stadnik found himself drawn to the biker lifestyle. He joined a small outlaw club called the Cosmics, where he felt a sense of belonging that resonated with his Ukrainian heritage. His ambition grew, and he aspired to rise through the ranks of the group. However, his path wasn't without obstacles. He befriended Mario, the Wap Parente, a prominent figure in the biker scene, but their friendship soured when Parente denied Stadnik membership into the Satan's Choice chapter due to his height. This rejection stung, especially considering Satan's Choice was one of the most influential biker clubs in Canada during the 1960s and 70s. Even after facing setbacks, Stadnik's determination only intensified. He continued to carve out a place for himself in the biker world, earning a reputation as a tough and resilient individual. His involvement with the Cosmics and his resilience in the face of rejection laid the groundwork for his future endeavors. Stadnik's rise to power didn't happen overnight. He applied cunning tactics, reminiscent of McDonald's franchising model, to elevate the Hells Angels from errand boys to formidable players in the criminal underworld. Through strategic maneuvers and shrewd alliances, he positioned the Hells Angels as a force to be reckoned with, sitting at the same table as some of the most powerful Mafia families in North America. Despite facing rejection from the Satan's Choice chapter, Stadnik remained determined to make his mark in the biker world. He joined the Wild Ones Outlaw Biker Club in 1977 and swiftly rose through the ranks, becoming their leader within a year. Unlike many of his peers, Stadnik stood out for his disciplined lifestyle, abstaining from smoking, drugs, and only drinking in moderation. He seemed focused on something greater, according to a journalist who closely observed him. Meanwhile, tensions were mounting in Montreal as various biker clubs vied for dominance. In July 1977, Mario Parente and his Hamilton Satan's Choice chapter aligned with the Outlaws, while the Popeyes of Montreal transitioned to become the first Hells Angels chapter in Canada. The stage was set for a violent showdown. The conflict erupted on February 17, 1978, when a Hells Angels assassin named Apache Trudeau shot two outlaws in Montreal, igniting a full-scale biker war. Initially, Stadnik's Wild Ones flew under the radar, perceived as a lesser threat by the rival clubs. However, Stadnik saw an opportunity to elevate his status. In October 1978, he journeyed to Montreal to meet with Yves Bateau, the national president of the Hells Angels at the time, expressing his desire to join forces. As fate would have it, during their meeting, Stadnik found himself caught in the crossfire of the Le Tourbillon massacre. Two outlaws stormed the bar, triggering a shootout that claimed lives on both sides. Miraculously, Stadnik survived the ordeal, hiding under a table until the violence subsided. In the aftermath, many of Stadnik's Wild Ones fell victim to the vengeance of the outlaws, leaving him as the sole Hells Angel in Hamilton. With pressure mounting, he eventually made the decision to join the Hells Angels Mother Chapter in Montreal, seeking refuge from the relentless onslaught. Life in Montreal presented its own challenges for Stadnik, especially as he didn't speak French. Despite this obstacle, he managed to ascend the ranks within a French-Canadian biker club and achieved the status of a full-patch Hells Angel on May 26, 1982. However, in December of the same year, Stadnik made the decision to return to Hamilton, accompanied by a close friend and fellow former Wild One named Frenchie, who now also belonged to the Hells Angels and served as Stadnik's translator. Despite his aspirations, Hamilton wasn't exactly welcoming to the Hells Angels. Stadnik had to keep a low profile as he strategized to establish a chapter in his hometown. Unfortunately, tragedy struck. Frenchie and his girlfriend became tangled in a cycle of cocaine addiction, leading to a horrific incident On February 17, 1983, in a drug-induced state of paranoia, Frenchie shot his girlfriend multiple times, resulting in her survival, but tragically claiming the life of her son and Frenchie's best friend. The chaos escalated as Frenchie wandered the streets, firing an empty gun indiscriminately. The aftermath of this incident severely tarnished the reputation of the Hells Angels and dealt a significant blow to Stadnik's plans of establishing a chapter in Ontario. On September 8, 1983, Stadnik faced yet another setback with the loss of Yves Bateau, the national president of the Hells Angels. Many believed that this assassination signaled the beginning of the end for Stadnik's career as an outlaw biker. Without fluency in French and lacking a powerful partner, his ambitions seemed foiled. However, despite these challenges, Stadnik remained determined to elevate the Hells Angels to unprecedented heights in Canada. He envisioned the Hells Angels as the sole dominant biker club in the country. Fortunately, Stadnik's dedication did not go unnoticed. The successor to Bateau recognized Stadnik's contributions and awarded him the Filthy Few patch, a symbol of high status within the club, often associated with those willing to go to extreme lengths for their organization. With this newfound recognition came a renewed sense of purpose for Stadnik. His mission now was to establish a Hells Angels chapter in Ontario, a region notorious for its Mafia presence. Hamilton, in particular, was under the firm control of three powerful crime families, the Papalia, Musitano, and Lupino Mafia clans, among them Johnny the Enforcer. Papalia, leader of the Papalia crime family, stood out as a formidable adversary. Papalia harbored a deep disdain for outlaw biker clubs like the Hells Angels, viewing them as a threat to his dominance over Hamilton's underworld. Despite facing opposition from entrenched Mafia interests, Stadnik remained determined in his quest to establish a Hells Angels presence in Ontario. Despite Stadnik's determination to establish a Hells Angels chapter in Hamilton, Johnny Papalia vowed to prevent it at all costs. Stadnik was forced into hiding for months as he navigated the perilous landscape of Hamilton's criminal underworld. Papalia, along with Mario Parente, made it clear that any Hells Angels member would be met with lethal force. On September 8, 1984, while en route to Yves Bateau's memorial service, Stadnik narrowly escaped death when a speeding vehicle collided with his motorcycle. The accident left him with severe disfiguring injuries, including burns and the loss of parts of his face and fingers. Stadnik spent months in the hospital, fearing assassination attempts from his enemies. During his recovery, Stadnik received protection from the 13th Tribe biker gang and law enforcement, who guarded his hospital room day and night. Despite his physical and emotional scars, Stadnik remained committed to expanding the Hells Angels' influence. In recognition of their loyalty, the 13th Tribe was granted the opportunity to join the Hells Angels, becoming the first chapter in Atlantic Canada. After the accident, Stadnik led a more withdrawn life, residing in a trailer park in Hamilton. He maintained a low profile and found employment at the Rebel Roadhouse, a local establishment. Despite the hardships he faced, Stadnik continued to contribute to the growth of the Hells Angels, although in a more subdued manner. Despite the risks and challenges, Stadnik continued to expand the influence of the Hells Angels in Canada. In Hamilton, a secret office provided sanctuary for passing Hells Angels, shielding them from the threats posed by both rival outlaw biker gangs and Mafia families. However, the secrecy of their location was compromised when some outlaws discovered it and planned to bomb the area using a rocket launcher. Fortunately, law enforcement intercepted the plot, preventing a potential catastrophe. Officer Harris remarked that the outlaws would have carried out the attack if Mario Parente, their former leader, had still been at large. Thankfully, Parente was behind bars, facing manslaughter charges, which loosened his grip on the outlaws. With Parente out of the picture, Stadnik seized the opportunity to strengthen ties with the Hells Angels mother chapter in Montreal. During one visit, he formed a close friendship with Maurice Boucher, a newly fully patched member. Despite the language barrier, the two men bonded instantly, establishing a powerful alliance. In 1987, Stadnik turned his attention to Toronto, where he sought to recruit the Vagabonds chapter into the Hells Angels. Donald Melanson, the chapter's leader, expressed interest in joining but faced obstacles due to his cocaine addiction. Melanson's drug habit led him to consume much of the cocaine he was supposed to sell, leaving him indebted to the Hells Angels for $80,000. To repay his debt, Melanson mortgaged his house, providing $50,000 in cash with a promise to settle the remainder promptly. Tragedy struck again, when the morning after Donald Melanson was supposed to meet with representatives of the Hells Angels. He was found dead in his hotel room, shot twice in the skull. This shocking incident caused a rift between the Hells Angels and the Vagabonds, leading to the cancellation of their patching over arrangements. While disappointing, this was the least of Stadnik's concerns. Back in Montreal, the Canadian Hells Angels were facing their own crisis. The infamous Lennoxville massacre of 1985 had left the club reeling. Apache Trudeau, the club's lethal assassin, had turned informant, providing damning evidence that resulted in the imprisonment of many club members. More than half of the Mother Chapter's members were either incarcerated, convicted, or on the run. Even the national president had fled to Morocco to evade murder charges. In a last-ditch effort to salvage the club, the remaining members turned to Stadnik. Recognizing his leadership and resilience, they appointed him as the national president of the Hells Angels. Becoming the president of the Hells Angels in Canada during this tumultuous period was no easy feat for Stadnik. Some members of the club remarked that he assumed the position almost by default, being the last senior member with some level of intelligence. However, Stadnik wasted no time in taking action. Recognizing the importance of establishing a strong presence in Quebec, Stadnik appointed his close friend Maurice Mom Boucher as his lieutenant in the province. With Boucher overseeing operations in Quebec, Stadnik focused on expanding the reach of the Hells Angels elsewhere. However, Stadnik's leadership was soon tested when he found himself in police custody on August 23, 1988. He was apprehended alongside Douglas Freeborn, in possession of 11 ounces of hash. This marked the third time Stadnik had been arrested since his days with the Classics in 1971. Fortunately for Stadnik, Freeborn took full responsibility for the drugs and testified in court to Stadnik's innocence, leading to his release. Detective Harris noted Stadnik's cunning ability to evade trouble, remarking on his knack for slipping out of dangerous situations. Despite the scrutiny and challenges of his presidency, Stadnik remained calm about his title. When questioned about his newfound position of power, he dismissed it, attributing the attention to mere circumstance. Despite his elevated status within the Hells Angels, Stadnik maintained a relatively low profile in his working-class neighborhood of Hamilton. Driving around in a Jaguar, he was unmistakably recognized as someone of importance, even by law enforcement. However, despite their awareness of his presence, authorities were unable to take action against him. Throughout the 1990s, Stadnik directed much of his efforts towards expanding the influence of the Hells Angels into Manitoba and Ontario. Southern Ontario, in particular, held significant appeal due to its affluent population's demand for drugs. Meanwhile, Manitoba served as a crucial distribution hub for narcotics flowing into and out of the country. In 1991, Bernie Guindon, the national president of the Satan's Choice, was released from prison, presenting an opportunity for Stadnik to extend an invitation to join the Hells Angels. Despite Stadnik's efforts, Guindon, who had founded Satan's Choice from scratch in 1965, declined the offer, remaining true in his allegiance to his own club and unwilling to merge with an American-based organization. Known for his understated demeanor mixed with luxurious attire, Stadnik continued to attract attention, particularly from law enforcement. On June 26, 1992, he was arrested at Winnipeg International Airport, sporting his signature rings and chains along with an extravagant full-length wolf coat and a snakeskin belt. Notably, the belt concealed a hollow compartment housing a solid gold buckle. Stadnik faced charges related to his alleged involvement in illegal activities, with authorities seizing $80,000 in cash from him, along with an additional $15,000 hidden within the gold buckle. The trial stretched on for months, but ultimately the charges against Stadnik were dropped after he forfeited the seized money. In the same month as his legal troubles, Stadnik ventured to Wasaga Beach, where he met with Frank Lenti, leader of the Loners, one of Ontario's formidable outlaw biker clubs. Despite his personal reservations about Lenti, Stadnik recognized the Loners' strategic position in Ontario's biker landscape. However, Lenti rebuffed Stadnik's proposal for the Loners to merge with the Hells Angels and instead extended an invitation for Stadnik to join them. Unwilling to compromise his allegiance, Stadnik walked away. While Stadnik failed to persuade the Loners to patch over to the Hells Angels, he didn't abandon his ambitions. From 1993 onwards, he secured a significant foothold as the Loner's chief drug supplier, solidifying his influence in Ontario's illegal drug trade. The following year, in 1994, tensions within the Loners escalated when Blendini was expelled from the club, amid rumors of theft. Many insiders suspected Stadnik's involvement in spreading these rumors, further consolidating his control over the biker underworld. Meanwhile, in Manitoba, Stadnik faced opposition from the Satan's Choice, Grim Reapers, and Lost Bravos, who had formed a pact to keep the Hells Angels out of Western Canada. However, Stadnik astutely identified Winnipeg as the weak link in their alliance. The Spartans and Lost Bravos, the dominant outlaw biker clubs in the area, were engaged in constant conflict, providing Stadnik with an opportunity to exploit their vulnerabilities. Rapidly asserting their presence, the Hells Angels facilitated the entry of the Spartans and Los Bravos into the drug trade, offering a more lucrative and less labor-intensive alternative to their previous activities. Stadnik swiftly positioned himself as their primary cocaine supplier, capitalizing on their newfound dependence on drug profits. Leveraging his influence, Stadnik compelled the two biker clubs to declare a truce, putting an end to their destructive biker wars that had been detrimental to business. Despite this success in Manitoba, Ontario remained stubbornly resistant to the Hells Angels' expansion efforts. In a desperate bid to gain a foothold in Toronto, Stadnik established a puppet club called the Demon's Keepers and dispatched them to the city. However, this strategy backfired disastrously. Not only did the Demon's Keepers lack proficiency in English, but their social skills were also sorely lacking. After 3 months of dismal performance, Stadnik was left with no choice but to disband the club in April 1994. Meanwhile, back in Montreal, Stadnik faced a new challenge in the form of the American Hells Angels, led by Scott Steiner. As Steiner eyed the national presidency of the club, he seized upon the failure of the Demon's Keepers to tarnish Stadnik's reputation. He even managed to sway Stadnik's bodyguard to defect and join his ranks, further complicating Stadnik's position within the club's hierarchy. Scott Steiner continued to be a persistent thorn in Stadnik's side, but the president couldn't afford to ease up on his expansion efforts. Complicating matters further was the looming specter of a massive biker war between the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine, a conflict that would wreak havoc for nearly a decade and claim over 150 lives, including innocent bystanders. Thankfully, Stadnik had a reliable ally in Maurice Boucher, who had agreed to handle affairs in Montreal, while Stadnik focused on expanding the club's reach. Boucher's approach differed markedly from Stadnik's, favoring total annihilation of rivals rather than diplomatic solutions. He spearheaded the brutal biker war that raged from 1994 to 2002, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Sources revealed that Stadnik made monthly visits to Montreal to confer with Boucher and monitor the progress of the conflict. Coincidentally, around the same time, Stadnik's rival Steiner and his bodyguard were last seen leaving Boucher's residence. Their bodies were later discovered floating in the St. Lawrence River, their heads brutally bashed in. With the biker war consuming Montreal, Stadnik shifted his focus to Winnipeg, where he established the Redliners using a puppet club from Montreal. The West had never seen bikers like them before, and even local law enforcement officers were taken aback by their polished and refined demeanor. The Redliners presented a new breed of outlaw bikers, challenging perceptions and raising eyebrows with their sophistication and dignified manner. In addition to their sophistication, the Redliners, as a puppet club of a puppet club, enjoyed triple insulation, making them incredibly elusive and difficult to track or pin down. Stadnik dedicated much of the 1990s to operating in Winnipeg, Manitoba. However, it was on June 24, 1995, that he and Maurice Boucher conceived what would become one of his most ingenious ideas yet: the legendary Hells Angels Nomad Chapter. Comprised of the best and most powerful angels, the Nomad Chapter transcended geographical limitations within Canada. Alongside Stadnik and Boucher, it boasted 8 other members, whose authority was unquestionable. But Stadnik didn't stop there. Within the Nomad Chapter, he formed another exclusive group known as the Table. This select circle consisted of the 6 most influential Hells Angels in Canada, tasked with setting drug prices. Alongside Stadnik and Boucher sat Chouinard, Rose Hewlett, and Robitaille. According to journalist Julian, the Nomads epitomized toughness and power, cementing their status as the apex of the pyramid within the Hells Angels hierarchy. a structure unparalleled in other biker clubs. Meanwhile, the table wielded formidable influence, amassing vast fortunes through their dealings. Stadnik's approach to conducting business was unique. Unlike other club presidents who flaunted their presence, he operated with subtlety and finesse. Despite his national stature, Stadnik refrained from establishing his own chapter in his hometown of Hamilton. He avoided media attention and police scrutiny, blending into the community seamlessly. He even demonstrated care for his elderly parents, often driving them to Sunday services at the local Catholic church. A stark contrast to his notorious reputation in the criminal underworld, Don Bell of the Provincial Police Bikers Enforcement offered a half-hearted commendation for Stadnik's distinct approach, acknowledging his ability to elude prosecution. Despite Stadnik's notoriety and clear criminal activities, he excelled at keeping a safe distance from the law, making it challenging for authorities to gather the evidence necessary for charges. Stadnik's method of operation epitomized a level of professionalism within the Hells Angels, although one tinged with disdain from law enforcement. From July 1997 to late 2000, Stadnik and the Hells Angels embarked on a concerted effort to further expand their influence. Experts attribute this expansion to the decreased need for caution following the assassination of Johnny Papalia, leader of the Papalia Mafia family, orchestrated by their rivals, the Musitano Mafia family. The subsequent deaths of two outlaw leaders and a Spartan president in April 1997 further facilitated the Hells Angels' advance into Ontario, effectively dismantling the Spartans. With his grip tightening on the drug trade, Stadnik emerged as the primary drug supplier in three provinces: Manitoba, Quebec, and Ontario. In the summer of 1998, he orchestrated the establishment of the Sherbrooke Hells Angels chapter and initiated contact with Tommy Ward, leader of a powerful non-biker gang based in Niagara Falls. Ward, known for his association with the Magadino crime family, primarily dealt in cocaine. Stadnik aimed to persuade Ward to consider his services, despite the risk posed by affiliating with the most violent biker club in Canada. In 1999, Stadnik attempted to strike a deal with Danny Wolf, the recently released leader of the Indian Posse gang, aiming to establish the Hells Angels as the exclusive wholesaler of drugs to the Indian Posse. The Indian Posse held significant influence in Western Canada, particularly in the drug trade. However, negotiations fell apart when Wolf insisted on equality rather than subordination. He wanted the Indian Posse to stand as equals, rather than behind or in front of the Hells Angels. Finally, in June 2000, Stadnik and the Hells Angels achieved the recognition they had been tirelessly working toward. The table faction of the Nomad chapter met with the Rizzuto Mafia family on equal footing to determine cocaine prices across Canada. They agreed on a price of $50,000 per kilogram, with severe consequences for those who undercut the price. Additionally, they divided Montreal into territories to prevent unnecessary conflicts. By the turn of the 21st century, the 5 Hells Angels chapters in British Columbia had become the wealthiest in the world, controlling a significant portion of the drug trade with the United States. Stadnik had undeniably ushered in the golden era of the Hells Angels in Canada, but he was far from finished. In the summer of 2000, Stadnik forever changed the landscape of Canada's outlaw biker scene. He introduced a groundbreaking offer of membership on a patch-for-patch basis, allowing bikers to join the Hells Angels without sacrificing their current status. Full patch members could join as equals without enduring the usual years as prospects or hangarounds. On December 29, 2000, with approval from American Hells Angels leaders, Stadnik orchestrated a mass patchover event in Montreal. Over 150 bikers, including members of various rival clubs such as Satan's Choice, Vagabonds, Lobos, Paradise Riders, Loners, Outlaws, and even Rock Machine eagerly joined the Hells Angels. The allure of joining the most powerful biker club in Canada proved irresistible to many in Ontario and beyond. Overnight, Ontario experienced a dramatic shift from having no Hells Angels chapter to boasting the highest concentration of Hells Angels members in the world. However, not everyone welcomed this development with open arms. Police officers and detectives criticized the Hells Angels, accusing them of scraping the bottom of the barrel by accepting members from what they considered to be the lowest echelons of the biker world. While some saw the addition of former members of clubs like Satan's Choice and Paradise Riders as acceptable, others viewed them more as drug addicts than true bikers. Nevertheless, Stadnik emerged victorious. In less than 2 decades, he defied all odds and revitalized a young and struggling biker club. Not only did he save it from obscurity, but he also established it as the most powerful outlaw biker club in Canada. Stadnik commanded the respect of most, if not all, bikers. Members of other clubs even served as bodyguards willing to stand guard outside restaurants, even in freezing winter conditions. The saga of Walter Stadnik, the legendary president, took a dramatic turn when, on March 28, 2001, law enforcement launched Operation Springtime against the burgeoning Hells Angels. A warrant for the arrest of National President Walter Stadnik was issued, levying an astounding 13 charges of first-degree murder related to the Hells Angels and Rock Machine biker war. To the surprise of authorities, Stadnik wasn't even in Canada at the time. He was in Jamaica. However, Jamaican authorities swiftly apprehended him. The following weeks in the Caribbean were grueling for Stadnik. Reports emerged of the dire conditions he endured, including severe overcrowding in the jail, where inmates shared one bucket for a toilet. Amidst this turmoil, Stadnik's common-law wife filed a lawsuit against the Jamaican authorities, criticizing the shocking conditions. Eventually, on April 10, 2001, Stadnik was extradited to Canada to face the charges against him. The authorities seized financial records from the powerful Nomad chapter, revealing staggering figures. Between March 1999 and December 2000 alone, the chapter had conducted drug transactions totaling over $11.5 million, primarily involving cocaine and hash. The arrest and subsequent legal proceedings marked a significant downfall for Stadnik, underscoring the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement authorities. Despite his legendary status within the biker community, even Stadnik could not escape the reach of the law forever. In Canada, further investigations uncovered files indicating that Gertrude was Stadnik's code name, revealing his involvement in importing vast quantities of illegal substances from the Mafia. Shockingly, within a span of less than a year, Stadnik, operating under this alias, managed to generate profits exceeding $3 million. However, pending investigations caused a delay in his trial until 2003. When the trial finally commenced, Stadnik was faced with a daunting array of charges, including 13 counts of murder, 3 of attempted murder, 1 for conspiracy to commit murder, 2 of narcotics trafficking, and 2 for attempting to smuggle narcotics. The legal proceedings were characterized by a back-and-forth struggle, with prosecutor Randall Richman pressing for Stadnik to be held accountable for the crimes of his associates, likening him to a war general responsible for his soldiers' actions. In response, Stadnik asserted his constitutional right and decided not to testify, citing his inability to speak French as a significant barrier. This decision necessitated the court to translate a staggering amount of evidence, including 500,000 documents and 10 CD-ROMs, which ultimately incurred a substantial cost to the government exceeding $23 million. As expected, the court rejected Stadnik's plea regarding the language barrier, noting that his lawyers were proficient in English. Eventually, on September 13, 2004, Stadnik was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, and benefiting from gang activities. He received a sentence of 14 years. Justice Jerry Zigman, presiding over the sentencing, didn't mince words, describing Stadnik and his accomplice, Stockford, as hardened criminals with little prospect of rehabilitation. Zigman emphasized their propensity for violence and labeled them as a danger to society, noting their lack of remorse for their actions. Throughout his incarceration, Stadnik's involvement in criminal activities persisted. He was transferred from a medium security to a maximum security prison on multiple occasions, notably in 2006 and 2009, due to his involvement in illegal trafficking and large-scale loan sharking, which took place within a Kingston area prison. Despite his significant illegal earnings, Stadnik maintained a facade of modest income, reporting no more than $35,000 annually on his tax filings. However, following his conviction, the Canada Revenue Agency conducted an audit to uncover his undisclosed income, which was subject to taxation. In 2006, Stadnik was reassessed by the CRA, leading to a demand for payment of $1.2 million in back taxes. Facing financial pressure, Stadnik filed for personal bankruptcy in 2008, citing an inability to afford the outstanding tax debt. Upon his release on parole in June 2014, Stadnik's probation was short-lived due to concerns about his associations with individuals with criminal records and his continued affiliation with the biker club. However, he managed to persuade the Parole Board of Canada to reinstate his freedom in December 2014. Nonetheless, strict conditions were imposed on him until April 12, 2019, including avoiding contact with individuals associated with street and motorcycle gangs, limitations on cell phone ownership, and detailed monitoring of his communications and online activities by parole officers. Despite his past criminal activities, Stadnik's parole conditions imposed strict limitations on his behavior. Prohibited from consuming alcohol or visiting bars, owning or operating a motorcycle, or engaging in motorcycle repair work, he was also subject to a nightly curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Given his history of involvement in drug trafficking and significant financial transactions, the parole board closely monitored his income and expenses. Additionally, he was barred from entering Quebec. Described as a polite and respectful inmate, Stadnik consistently denied any affiliation with the Hells Angels or culpability for his crimes. In 2018, Stadnik was reported to be working as a construction worker. Once his parole conditions restricting association with the Hells Angels expired in April 2019, he resumed contact with the group. Notably, he attended the funeral of a murdered Hells Angel, Suminder Ali Gruel, in Delta, British Columbia, on August 18, 2019. Walter Stadnik's impact on the Hells Angels was profound. Despite his conviction in 2004, the club continued to thrive and maintain its status as the most powerful outlaw biker club in Canada. Stadnik played a crucial role in elevating the Hells Angels from being mere subcontractors for the Mafia to being equals of the Mafia themselves. His leadership and influence transformed the organization, allowing it to assert dominance across the country. In his home province of Canada, Stadnik's legacy endured, with 184 Hells Angels operating in the country's largest drug market. Detective Sergeant Len Isner of the OPP's anti-biker unit confirmed the club's dominance, stating that the Hells Angels had a strong presence in nearly every province in Canada. Stadnik's strategic vision and leadership left an indelible mark on the Hells Angels, solidifying their position as a formidable force within the world of organized crime. As of 2016, it was estimated that the Hells Angels boasted approximately 450 members spread across almost every province in Canada. This widespread presence afforded them a level of dominance unparalleled by any other organized crime group in the country. The Hells Angels' extensive network and influence solidify their position as a formidable force within the Canadian criminal landscape.